Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this evening's live stream. Plenty to talk about as ever, and do comment. I'll be able to interact with the comments quite a bit tonight. Let's start off with a bit of an update, a bit of family party news. We've passed 10,000 YouTube subscribers. We passed it a few days ago. I never like to announce it too soon because sometimes YouTube subscribers go down a bit. I think sometimes it prunes some that are inactive. Anyway, so we're clear of the 10,000 barrier. Which is good. It'll keep going up. Facebook as well. We've gone over 14,000 followers on Facebook. And Facebook is going up quite fast because since we started short videos, we've had a lot of reach on Facebook. I think we're on 14,500 already. So if we keep going the way we're going, I think we'll see Facebook clocking up quite nicely over the weeks to come. I say some Facebook videos have had over 100,000 views. That doesn't mean 100,000 people have watched them through to the end, but it means tens of thousands of people are watching. A substantial chunk of it getting the message, reaching lots and lots of new people, which is great. The slight issue we have with Facebook, just to give you a bit of insight behind the scenes, is the things that really fly on Facebook is when we tap into things like sort of immigration, Hamza Yousaf, race, things like that. So there's a big market for that online. Then when we go to pro-life things, we think are much more important, actually. There isn't really the same market for those on Facebook. So we have tens of thousands, 100,000 views on some things. But then when we go to our more important issues, you don't quite get the same views. So it's a balance between getting lots of attention, getting lots of reach, and building up the page, building up the channels, and having to talk about, needing to talk about, wanting to talk about the things that are most important to us. And we've also, yet again, started a TikTok channel. We've had several TikTok channels before. They haven't lasted very long for various reasons, but we're trying again since short videos are now quite a big part of our output. That's at a very low level so far, so we'll try and work out how to make that grow. But if any of you are on TikTok, go and find us, give us a like and share a few things. That would be great. Right, what have we got to talk about this evening? Well, here's the first one. They've been talking about the assisted dying, so-called, bill in the Scottish Parliament, and they voted to raise the age from 16 to 18, which they said they were going to do. Liam MacArthur said he was going to do this ages ago. So they're debating various technicalities. To be honest, I haven't followed it particularly closely. How interested am I in the technicalities? Not particularly. I mean, to me, it's just the principle that is at stake. And that's really, it's not all that matters, but that's really the thing that we're focused on. If this passes in Scotland, the principle is being conceded that suicide can be formalized, legalized, and made respectable and provided on the NHS, basically assistance for suicide. So it's the principle at the heart of it we're interested in. So these tweaks and amendments, okay, we shouldn't ignore them, but they're not really our focus. And I think the final vote on this, people are not quite sure when it's going to be, but not too far away. Maybe if Liam MacArthur thinks, well, actually, I haven't got enough, I'm not sure I've got enough people to get this through, it's possible that he might say, well, I'm just going to stall it and wait until the next Parliament. The general feeling is that the next Scottish Parliament, from the perspective of people with our sort of values, is the next Scottish Parliament is going to be significantly worse than the current one. If you look, for example, at who the SNP have got lined up to make a comeback and who they're losing, it's generally they're losing some of their more socially conservative ones, relatively speaking, and they'll be gaining some of the most liberal, progressive ones. So I think the outlook from the Scottish Parliament next after the election is not good. If you look at polling at the moment, I mean, 2/3 of the Conservative MSPs will be replaced by Reform MSPs. What difference will that make on an issue like assisted suicide? Judging by Westminster, it'll make no difference. It might even be a bad thing, actually. I think the Conservatives overall voted against it in Holyrood. Reform in Westminster overall voted for it. So I think reform on these issues, it's not going to be any better than the Conservatives, probably. They'll just be, split down the middle. Won't really be much use on it. But the crunch vote might be coming. If it doesn't come before the next election, the reason is that Liam MacArthur's got cold feet and he thinks he's going to lose. so he is waiting for next time. Right. Good evening, Jonathan. Right. This is interesting. This is from the Herald. I always say that the Herald's social media is controlled by political activists, like far left, hyper progressive. It's like student politics. And it's fascinating to see them doing it, because they put out posts which are absolutely on their like progressive message, and the comments underneath them are just full of people just absolutely slating them. So much like the Herald's got some sort of death wish. It just wants to wind up the people who follow it and their potential customers. Anyway, this was just a flare up of the trans debate on their letters page. But yet again, they pulled out of their library is it fair to say famous? I think it's fair to say famous, very, very widely used picture of myself discussing with a young lady outside the Parliament. But it looks staged, doesn't it, that photograph? But it wasn't staged at all. But look at the caption under there. How many men say they're for women's rights on trans issues, but undermine their rights on every other, including abortion rights? You see that quite a bit, don't you? So an argument of the sort of pro-trans lobby is that some of the people on the other side, they're also pro-life. I mean, that argument doesn't make sense at all. But I guess from a sort of progressive perspective, there's this body of people that they disagree with about everything. And if you can point out that they're part of that group that they disagree with about everything, then that discredits them in some way. Yeah, so the argument is rumbling on. I've got another couple of things to put on here. It's actually Trans Awareness Week this week. It's Trans Day of Remembrance on Thursday. I'll just say a bit about that, actually. Trans Day of Remembrance. I mean, it's really a bit of a nonsense. The idea is that transgender people are getting murdered left, right, and centre, and so we need to remember them, because this is such a huge tragedy that's going on in our society. The last year, there were 362 murders of transgender people reported in the whole world, which, according to my calculations, is 99.9% lower than you'd just expect of the population. Same with the UK statistics as well. Roughly speaking, there's about one murder of a transgender person a year, which is obviously a terrible thing, but that is far fewer than you would be led to expect if transgender people were just average citizens. So there's no reason whatsoever for transgender people to be trying to suggest that there's some sort of epidemic of violence against them. Transgender people are getting murdered in such numbers. We need to have a special remembrance event for them. It's just fantasy, basically. It's political campaigning using a very small number of tragic events in order to gain political leverage through, trying to say it's about grief and mourning and remembrance, when actually it's just a form of political campaigning. Anyway, so there's Trans Day of Remembrance events taking place around Scotland, including one in Edinburgh on Tuesday night. No, not Tuesday night. That's not on Thursday night in Bristow Square. So watch this space. We might publish something by the end of the week about one of these transgender days of remembrance. Now, this slide here is from Scottish Trans or something. Look at the bottom right. It says, I really believe that our students are like flowers. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment it grows in, not the flower. Okay, that's what's called an argument from analogy. It's a formal logical fallacy because the argument just doesn't work. You can't argue by analogy. So they're basically saying, because if a flower isn't growing, the only thing you can do is change the environment, because there are not actually anything you can do inside of the flower. Because that applies to flowers, the same thing applies to transgender people. Therefore, if a transgender person is not flourishing, it's nothing whatsoever to do with any of their decisions or anything that they've done or are doing. It's only the external environment that you can affect. It's totally wrong. That's just not true. With transgender people, it's their own decisions, it's their own thinking that's at the heart of the issue, and that's therefore what should be at the heart of the solution. So yeah, if any of you are sort of logical, critical thinking teachers and you want a textbook example of argument from analogy, there it is. There it is. Right. I think they're suggesting trans suicides are part of the violence on trans identity. The statistics I looked at, they, I don't think so. Generally, they're claiming this is to do with murders. If you look up Trans Day of Remembrance, how did it start? What's it all about? The theme seems to be it's commemorating transgender people who've been murdered because they were transgender. Even out of those statistics for transgender people who were murdered, which were at a very, very, very low level, even out of those, there's no evidence how many of them were because the person was transgender. Now, I'll tell you a bit more about it, actually. I find it quite interesting. I would imagine the number of people, transgender people who get murdered, I would imagine it actually isn't lower than the national average or the world average because, well, a number of reasons. One reason might be that there might be some people who might attack someone and they might end up being killed because they were, hated transgender people or something. That's possible. I'm sure that happens on occasion. Another reason is, think about the lifestyle of transgender people. I would say in general, overall, they tend to be more into nightlife and drinking and, casual sex, whatever. And that's just an environment that is more dangerous than staying in for the evening watching the telly. Okay, so that might account for some of it. And the last factor I found really interesting, I'd never come across this until today, is the idea that, let's say a trans woman, we all know what I mean by that. So a trans woman goes to a bar, sort of picks up a bloke or gets picked up by a bloke, goes back to some flat somewhere, and basically they start having sex, at which point the man finds a surprise, finds an anatomical construct that he wasn't expecting to find in what he thought was a cis woman. I'm doing really well for all the algorithms checking this, aren't I? So he finds he's been tricked. And man, how would someone feel if that happens to them? I mean, they'll be furious, they'll be embarrassed, they would just feel terrible about it, absolutely terrible. And they feel that they've been conned and humiliated. So you can imagine they'll be very angry. There might be some sort of confrontation because the trans woman will be thinking, right, this is transphobia. This is really appalling. How can anyone treat me like this? So this is a very, very volatile situation, explosive situation. And you can imagine that could easily turn violent. And apparently in a number of cases it does. And it results in the trans person being injured or in some cases being killed. I wouldn't be surprised if it results in the man being injured or killed as well sometimes, because it is just creating such an explosive situation. So that will be a factor in the statistics as well. So anyway, that's a bit of background for Transgender Day of Remembrance. Let's move on from that. Okay. This is something from the Scottish Union for Education conference. One of their speakers must have said the BBC is still indoctrinating children with pro-trans agenda. Well, yeah, of course that's still going on. That is still going on the same as ever. That picture was from a series, and you can see the girl there sort of putting on the chest binder. Also, I think, actually, there's another slide. No, I didn't. Yeah, there's another news report as well saying transgender indoctrination is still going on in schools. Okay, great that that's been reported. That's what we need. We need it to be reported because it is just going on. The guidance has not changed. The sex, gender and sexuality lesson plans have not changed. They're still being used across Scotland, and we need to keep the focus on it because it is absolutely still going on, and every generation of children that comes through it will be damaged by it, and their families as well. And last on this little series, Tom Daly, I don't follow Dive, he's obviously become a bit of a public figure, and he started some sort of business or project knitting. How would you describe the knitwear? I mean, it's not the most masculine garments, is it? And he's gay as well, isn't it? So you can see that Screen Scotland, are they going to jump on this and think this is someone we want to back? Of course it is. Of course it is. Now, if this had been some sort of heterosexual diver whose hobby was like fixing up classic cars, would Screen Scotland have swooped in with some contract to make him into some sort of media figure? Absolutely not. Forget it. Forget it. But because he's gay and he's going to do some sort of gender bending type thing, then absolutely he gets the money, he gets the cash, he gets the job. Now, this is a big story for us this week. I think we're well over 100,000 views on a video about it on Facebook. Done pretty well on YouTube as well. Now, this business with the BBC editing Trump's speech, I followed that, obviously, terrible, made a video about it. But then a couple of people said to me, this is what they did to Pauline Gallagher. And I remember, yes, it is. It was the Panorama program as well. This was back in 2020. And Pauline Gallagher did an interview about LGBT books in schools. And the Panorama got the interview. They took the footage of a question and then edited in Pauline's answer to a different question. So made her say something that she hadn't said, basically. You can watch the video for full details. That was a response on Twitter, someone saying, did she actually say that? Well, the answer is no. No, she didn't actually say that. So Pauline was treated the same as President Trump. And yeah, the rot is deep at the BBC. I would say I've thought sometimes when I've been to BBC interviews, if it's not live, I think, should I put my phone on just to record the whole thing so that if there is some dodgy goings on, I could just at least have the raw audio recording. I suppose audio recording is easier to mess with. You'd really want live your own video recording, wouldn't you? Just to make sure they don't do that. I think if ever I'm asked to do something that's not live, I would do that. It's almost always live when I want things, but yeah. The BBC. Now, kilts. I've been following this story. It's probably the sort of story that doesn't really fly on social media, but it's quite important. Bond's announcement, a proud day for Scotland, says Swinney. So basically, Scotland has somehow gained the authority or the ability to issue bonds. Bonds issued by the UK government are sometimes called gilts because they used to have gold edges. So people have suggested the Scottish ones should be called kilts. And I think that might actually be what they're officially going to be called. What it amounts to, that John Swinney is celebrating it, it's a new way to borrow money. Basically, a government bond is something the government sells. So the government, if you're going to buy one, say you give the government £1,000, the government gives you a bond, and that bond will pay interest at, say, I don't know, 3% a year for 20 years, and you can sell that bond, or you can keep it and just take the interest. But at the end of it, the government needs to buy it back, basically. Okay, the government needs to buy it back. It's for a fixed period of time. So all the time, bonds that the government sold in the past are coming up for renewal. And when they talk about the bond yield, then if the bond markets are not confident in the economy of Scotland, then when the government wants to sell new bonds, they'll have to give a higher rate of interest if people are a bit worried about whether or not they're going to be able to pay them back. At the moment for the UK, the markets are a bit worried. They're not particularly confident in the UK, so they need a higher rate of interest in order to take the risk of buying a UK government bond. And the same will apply to Scottish bonds as well. But the key thing here is basically it's a new way of borrowing money. The Scottish government's only allowed to borrow, as far as I'm aware, £450 million a year. They were given that authority a while ago, and they've just maxed out the credit card every year since. But they've now got a new way of borrowing money as well. So a new way of plunging further into debt. And all of the discussion on this, that aspect of it just seems to be completely absent. How about questions like, what's your plan for paying it back? And the answer is there's not remotely any plan for paying it back. That is not even considered in this. You just borrow and borrow and borrow. Now, people look at the UK economy and say, right, it's a very dangerous level of debt you get into here. This could cause major problems. The UK spends more on debt interest than defence. And the Scottish government is saying, okay, that's a decent amount of debt, but we want an even greater degree of indebtedness, which they've already been building up. And they're now going to be able to accelerate that with these bonds, by selling these bonds as well. As I say, imagine if it was a person saying, no, I'm miles in debt, I'm spending far more than my income, and I'm borrowing more and more every year. But good news, everyone, I found a new way of borrowing even more money. You said to them, what's your plan to pay it back? They said, no plan. I don't know. We'll only be the government for a while. I mean, paying it back, that's future generations can worry about that. What would you say to an individual who did that? You'd say, wow, this person is irresponsible and unwise, but that's just routine from a lot of governments around the world, but including in Scotland. Okay, right. Have a timer visible at all times when speaking. Don't you get that? Are you talking about through the conference? I'm not sure. Right, J.D. Vance made a comment about his wife a little while ago. J.D. Vance is Catholic. He's quite a recent convert, I understand. And his wife is a Hindu. And J.D. Vance recently said that he hoped his wife became a Christian. And there are all sorts of people objecting, saying this is a really terrible thing. It's disrespectful. I mean, I don't know if anyone was sort of saying it was racist, but it was sort of leaning in that direction. How could you should respect other religions? It's a multi-faith society, etc. They're really horrified that he would say that he hopes his wife embraces Christianity. But anyone who says that, they really do not understand Christianity, or for that matter, Islam. Because if you're a Christian and you believe the core teachings of Christianity, you wish everybody was a Christian. You don't want people to believe in things that are not true. You don't want people to be missing out on what you believe are the benefits, temporal and eternal, of Christianity. So you want everyone to become a Christian for their own benefit. Okay, it might have other benefits for J.D. Vance. It might make family life easier in some ways, or might bring them closer in some ways, or whatever. But ultimately, you'd want someone to be a Christian for their benefit. Muslims believe the same sort of thing. They want everyone to be a Muslim because they believe that's true. They don't want people believing things that are not true, and Allah looking down thinking, oh, what are those people doing? What they believe in? They've got it all, they're all confused. They've got it all wrong. I wish they'd just follow the one true path by being Muslims. So Muslims want everyone to become Muslims. Now, when it comes to Eastern religions, Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, it tends to be a little bit different. And the reason is because of what they believe. When I've spoken to Hindu, I think it was a Hindu once, and they were saying, okay, you're a Christian. Okay, I don't think it's true, but that's the stage you're at. Maybe when you come back in the next life, you might not be. Maybe, you'll come back for a few more lives, then eventually you'll rise to the level of being a Hindu. So the fact that you're a Christian now, well, that's no big deal. I don't particularly need to try and persuade you to become a Hindu because you're just going through a Christian phase. And so Eastern religions don't tend to be so hot on conversion like that. But it's not because they're particularly like open-minded and tolerant or whatever. It's just they believe different things, different core religious beliefs. But the outrage about J.D. Vance was quite interesting. Again, just shows that a lot of people have got no idea about what religious people believe or the way that they think. Right, moving on. Right, that's an entertaining slide, isn't it? That's going to boost the audience. Right, this is a little bit from a letter from an MP by the name of Adnan Hussein, who is one of the independent, basically pro-Gaza MPs who got elected in 2024 into Westminster. Now, I think the election of those MPs was a very, very concerning development, and I hope it's turned around. I hope we don't get what is basically a Muslim voting bloc, because that's the agenda they stood on. They stood on pro-Gaza, and they appealed to Muslims in areas where there's lots of Muslims, which I think is not the way we want politics to go. I think we would want Muslims to be involved in other parties, including the family party, if they agree with our values, which some Muslims do. Right, but let's see what Adnan Hussein had to say, because he's resigned from Jeremy Corbyn's Your Party, which seems a total disaster area. I mean, they're falling out with each other, insulting each other left, right, and centre. I mean, how the thing is still regarded as having any credibility, I do not know. But anyway, he's left. And I'm just going to read you a bit from later on in the first paragraph there. He said, I believed in a movement that welcomed a diversity of background and thought, including working class communities like my own constituency, people of faith, and those who may be socially conservative, yet economically left-leaning, while holding firm to a commitment to equality, justice, and anti-racism. So socially conservative. So in other words, what Adnan Hussein wants is he wants a big anti-racism, maybe like Islamophobia type laws. He wants that sort of thing, but he's socially conservative. He does not want like the philosophy of transgenderism, for example, or maybe LGBT issues in general. He's not on board for that at all. So he's felt he had to leave Jeremy Corbyn's Your Party. I mean, no prizes for seeing this coming. I mean, it's obviously going to come, wasn't it? It's just inevitable that these differences were going to come to the fore. There was a little video floating around last week I saw when there was an anti-immigration, anti-Islam rally of some sort by UKIP. And UKIP now I have no respect for whatsoever. They're very inflammatory and totally over the top. And inevitably, they'd provoked a counter demonstration by Muslims, a big crowd of Muslims marching along the street, Muslim young men who, I have to say, look quite threatening, a lot with masks on, all wearing black, etc. But then there's the usual left-wing pro-immigration people, everyone welcome here types, cheering them on. And at one point, someone in the crowd shouts to the Muslims and says, "We're on your side." And they shout back saying, "No, you're not." And I think that is what we're going to see unfolding in the months to come. I mean, the Green Party are trying this as well. The Green Party had candidates elected who shouted Allah Akbar when they were elected. That alliance is not going to hold because there's a total contradiction at the heart of it. I mean, the Labour Party the Labour Party still got a lot of Muslims in it, a lot of left, but they've still got a lot. They seem somehow to be able to hold this together, but I don't see it holding for much longer. The left-wing progressive and hardline Muslim alliance is going to dissolve before our eyes, and it's already happening. Right, there's John Swinney again. That's in one of his multi-faith events. John Swinney loves multi-faith events. He really plays the faith card a lot, and I worry that inviting people to these events, it sort of neutralizes them. So people who ought to be really very critical of John Swinney and the Scottish government in lots of areas, they get invited to a nice event, have some drinks and canapes, and listen to a probably sort of bland series of platitudes from John Swinney, to be honest, I would imagine. But they go away feeling that they've been the special guest of the government. You know, what an honour. And what does that do to their attitude to John Swinney? Well, okay, they might not agree with anything, but he seemed a really nice person, and he invited me to a lovely, lovely event. Such people might be less inclined to turn on John Swinney and direct the criticism that he deserves at him. So I think that is, it's a tactic. I guess politicians use this with all types of people as well. They want to invite as many people in as possible in order to develop a warm relationship, often in order to diffuse what might be or hostility among the people. So I think people should be aware of that. Be aware of that danger. Respectability is a powerful drug, I heard someone saying there. Right, a few things to throw in about Reform, always in the news. I mean, that's from Reform's social media, showing most trusted leader on the economy, 34%, 29%, 24%. I said earlier on about there being a textbook example of the logical error of argument from analogy. This is a textbook example of the deliberately deceptive tactic of false axes. 34% is not about 4 or 5 times greater than 24%. So that graph is deliberately misleading. I mean, the Lib Dems would be proud of that one on one of their leaflets. I just think, why do that? Why do that? If you've got the highest score and you want to do a graph, why not just do an honest, proper graph that actually shows the proportions properly? I do think there's an integrity issue when people deliberately use misleading graphs, and that is a misleading graph. So I'd say to Reform, leave that to the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems are famous for it, for producing dodgy graphs, but leave it to the Lib Dems. There's another issue with Reform that's been bubbling around in the background. Nigel Farage has basically said if someone was a nationalist, they could be a Reform candidate. You know, if they've been an SNP voter or whatever, as long as they've turned over a new leaf and they don't think that anymore. Right. Is that a reasonable thing to say? To be honest, I think, yes, it is. Yeah, fine. Why not? People change their mind about things. I guess there'd be the concern that you get people who think, I think Reform's the vehicle to try and get myself elected. I'm actually a bit of a nationalist, but I'll keep that under my hat to try to get elected. That's a danger, I suppose. But the Conservatives are attacking reform over this. And saying, oh, you see, you can't trust reform on the union. They're going soft on the union. And some campaigners as well say the same sort of thing. They've always attacked reform, saying that there are chinks in their credentials as unionists because they have people associated with them who used to be nationalists. Now, I think as far as the Conservatives are concerned, the Conservatives are used to having their key card is just we're the ultra unionists, and that's been enough to get them a decent slice of the vote. But Labour have been a bit soft on the union. So Conservatives are used to being able to play this card. If you play the union card really hard, then that gets you, 30% of the vote or whatever. That's probably not the case anymore, but the Conservatives are still trying to play that card. And to be honest, I think it seems a bit stale now, but I think Scottish independence seems a bit stale as well. I think political debate has moved on. I think the independence issue could roar into life again. Who knows in the future? But I think at the time being, it's a pretty low ebb. But yeah, we'll see how that develops. And the last thing with reform, their defector in the Scottish Parliament, Graham Simpson, he defected from the Conservatives. He apparently, I haven't seen the raw video, so I'm not sure how this is representative of what he said, but it's been reported that he basically admitted that reform's only got two policies in Scotland, and that is cut immigration and net zero, and abandon net zero. Now, I would say with reform, they are their two policies, basically. That's what they talk about and talk about and talk about, and that's how they seek to attract support. The net zero used to be higher up their agenda, but now it's basically that they're an anti-immigration party. That absolutely dominates their thinking. They do reform in the UK level, do have policies in lots of different areas, but if you look at what they emphasize, what they talk about, what they put on social media, I mean, immigration is dominating it by a mile, which I felt increasingly in the last week or two. They just seem to be going harder and harder line on it. And I think there's a distinct possibility that they're overreaching themselves. When they're talking about removing people from the country, people with indefinite leave to remain, people with dual citizenship, etc., I just worry that they're just they feel that the electorate wants them to go further and further and further, and that's what they're doing. And I think it's going to backfire on them. But that's my prediction. That's my prediction. As long as they think it's working, they will go harder and harder line. And eventually, I think they might go so far, maybe they're heading to that point now, they're crossing that line now, where the public is going to say, whoa, that's really a bit much. Because they will know people who've been affected by these things. Been fascinating though. At the Family Party conference, we passed a motion about reducing the right to bring people into the country through family reunification. And you can see Labour is doing that now. Labour is doing this. I mean, when we proposed that policy within our group and we discussed it, people gave feedback. A few people thought, oh, that's maybe a bit much. Is it? But the Labour Party is basically doing the same thing now as well. So as I was saying with immigration, the Family Party, we've got very decisive policies on illegal immigration, and I think very intelligent policies on how to control legal immigration. But we're not obsessed with it, and we're not constantly thinking of new ways we can appeal to anti-immigrant sentiment. Let's put it that way. And I feel reform are really starting to go over the top on this. End the BBC license. That's Family Party policy as well. That's always been our policy, to make the BBC a subscription service rather than a license service. And then people like me can just not pay and not watch it. Right, do share this, whatever you're watching on. If there's a facility to share it, that would be great. I think I actually mentioned that last week. This is building up and building up, this thing. I mean, the Supreme Court made a judgment because two people in Scotland, let's read some of it, two men who'd been convicted of sexual assault or rape appealed on the grounds that they hadn't had a fair trial because of the restrictive rules in Scotland that prevent the accused in these sort of cases bringing forward some pieces of evidence that I say would be very important. So it says Daly and Co. argued that their right to a fair trial was infringed because they were unable to lead evidence or question the complainers about their credibility or previous sexual behavior. Now, you may say previous sexual behavior. You may think, no, who cares about their previous boyfriends or whatever? But this could be previous sexual behavior with this same person. It could have been, earlier on the same day or the night before, or it could also be their subsequent sexual behavior. Okay, that they had sex the night after as well. So you can have situations where a woman has sex with a man one day, on 3 occasions in succession, and then she decides that the middle one was rape, which it may be, that's not impossible. But the fact that the other 2 occasions existed is relevant to the case, I think. And also in terms of the credibility, if it's shown that a witness lied about some other encounter, some other accusation that they made, then that is relevant evidence. But this sort of thing is being excluded. So while rejecting their appeals, the Supreme Court said that the courts had a duty to modify their approach to be compatible with Article 6, which I think is the right to a fair trial. So basically, the Supreme Court has said to the Scottish legal system, you've got to change the rules you're applying in these cases. But the Scottish legal system replies basically saying, well, no, we're not going to. We're not going to harm victims' rights. So that sounds to me like a standoff here. But the Supreme Court, the clue's in the name, has got the overriding authority. So we'll see what's going to happen here. You see, the Law Society of Scotland welcomed the judgment. So the lawyers, as we've heard lots of times, are basically saying, yes, the system in Scotland is not fair. These accused men, generally men, are not getting a fair trial. But Rape Crisis Scotland, that famous collective of legal experts, I don't think, describe the ruling as a real step backwards. You can see what's happening here. I mean, extreme feminist campaigning groups like Rape Crisis Scotland have managed to persuade the government, which had influenced the legal system in Scotland, to skew the playing field in favour of the accused, too far in favour of the accused. So lawyers and the Supreme Court are saying, look, Scottish courts, you've got this wrong. But the Scottish top legal figures and organisers like Rape Crisis Scotland are saying, no, we haven't. We're going to stick to our guns. So that battle will grind on for a while. Right, that's a very quick story. I think this picture is from Singapore, but there are lots of countries where children sweep up, clear up the classroom at the end of the day. Family party policy, we'd have that going on in Scotland as well. Why not? Get them into good habits. Reformers banned rainbow flags. They have. I've talked about this issue before. That's what Reform would be good at on this issue. They'd be good at getting rid of the flag. Well, how much would they change what was taught? I think they'd get a grip on the transgender bit, but teaching LGB relationships as normal, natural, and healthy to be celebrated, etc., that would carry on as normal. If you look at some figures in Reform, there's a reasonable number of LGB activists in Reform, and they go out of their way to show how affirming they are of LGB lifestyles and relationships. Okay, because they say that's, 10 or 20 years ago, they'd have been against them, a lot of these people, but they're now for them because they're cultural conservatives. They're just like 20 years behind the trend. Whereas we would say we've got a different philosophy. Our philosophy of sexual relationships should be a man and a woman, ideally married, and falling in love, getting married, bringing up children within the family home. That's our ideal. Reform doesn't affirm that ideal. Reform would say any type of sexual relationship is equally valid. So they take the flag off the top of the school, but I don't think they would change the philosophy taught within the school with regards to lesbian, gay, and bisexual relationships. Right, let's have a look at this. I've heard people attack Shabana Mahmood. It's part of Pakistan. She already is from, is the one that tends to exploits family reunification the most. Yes, yeah. I heard once that some MPs in Birmingham, for example, 95% of their casework was immigration issues. So basically, you've got someone in, some part of Birmingham, for example, and they go to their MP and say, right, I want to bring X number of additional family members into the UK. And the MP would say, okay, I'll try and help you. I'll write a letter. I'll do what I can. I'll tell you how the system works. I'll try and enable that to happen. Then they do enable that to happen. And what's the benefit for the MP? Well, you win over some votes because you've helped these people, and the new people you've got into the country as well. But there's a few more votes for you. So you're going to be pretty safe in your seat. So I'd imagine a lot of Labour MPs have built up their reputation and their support by doing that. Imagine how infuriated they must be when they import this massive population from Pakistan, then find that they vote for a Muslim pro-Gaza candidate. Because that's what's happening. That's what has happened in some constituencies. I mean, some got elected and some got close to being elected, but that's basically the dynamic that is going on. So they're sort of biting the hand that feeds them in some ways. If Reform fails to get a majority, they will unite with the Lib Dems to pass proportional representation. I really hope they do. Right, this is an interesting hypothesis. Let me think about this one. So Reform fails to get a majority. So I guess they would seek coalition with the Conservatives. Right. Would Reform still want to be pushing for PR in that situation? Because if Reform, the way things look at the moment, Reform would be benefiting from first past the post. The party in the lead benefits from first past the post. If you're on like over 30%, first that past the post is suiting you quite well, particularly if there's just two parties up there. You'll want it the same. So I think even in that situation, Reform would still want it. Let's say by the next Westminster election, Reform have fallen a little bit in the polls. Labour and Conservatives have come up a little bit. It could well be that Reform could be the biggest party, but they're feeling hard done by the current system. And it could be that the Lib Dems and others will also be feeling hard done by. And it is conceivable that there could be a majority for proportional representation in the House of Commons. I think that would be fantastic, because as soon as it happens at Westminster, surely it will be introduced in Scotland and Wales as well, once that principle is adopted. And if that's adopted, fantastic. If we had full PR in Scotland, I think I would be an MSP now. And at the next Scottish elections, we'd definitely be looking, at least one MSP, maybe more, and that would be absolutely fair. Just to talk about that a bit more, I was talking to someone about this recently. If we did have full PR, who would have been in the Scottish Parliament recently? Well, Tommy Sheridan, or another sort of hard left figure, they would be in the Parliament. Would that add to the Parliament? Well, yes, they might talk a lot of rubbish, in my humble opinion, but you'd have people who are, of some stature and intelligence, quite articulate, and they would liven the place up and add to the debate. I mean, other leaders of small parties in Scotland. I mean, Tam Laird, leader of the Scottish Libertarians. I mean, they're very small. We got 3 times as many votes at them as the last election. But Tam Laird is an able politician, very intelligent, very articulate, and would bring a lot of new perspectives. So if we had full PR, more people would vote for small parties if they thought they had more of a chance. So let's say he got elected. Would he add something to the Parliament? Yes. Compared to a lot of the backbench MSPs there are now, who don't really bring anything, really. Okay, they might be good constituency MSPs. They might be very nice people, very diligent or whatever. So they might do a reasonable job. But in terms of bringing quality to the debate in the Parliament, they don't bring very much or anything. But someone like Tam Laird would be great. Scottish Family Party. Again, what would we add? What will we add when we get MSPs elected? An awful lot to the debate. But other parties, small parties as well. I mean, like Alex Salmond would have been in the Parliament, probably. For Alba, certainly if not last time, if he was still around, he'd be looking to get in this time for Alba. Again, would that be a good addition to the Parliament? Definitely. We'd have a much higher quality Parliament, much higher quality collection of MSPs if we had full proportional representation, because there are lots of leaders and senior people in small parties who would be far better MSPs than some of the people down the list with the other parties. So let's hope it happens. So let's wait and see. Time will tell. Time will tell. Right, this has been the big news story this week for us. It's been a big news story for everyone. I think this is the Scottish Government's Expert Advisory Group on Abortion reporting. Humza Yousaf created this group to basically as a step towards what he promised when he became leader of the SNP, became first minister, that he would decriminalize abortion. He promised that. So he set up this expert group to basically tell him what he wanted to hear. And that's exactly what they've done. People have honed in on the sex-selective abortion thing. I mean, quite rightly, because the report does recommend explicitly making sex-selective abortion legal. They're trying to claim it wouldn't. I mean, experts reject claims that it could legalize sex-selective abortions. I mean, it's just bizarre. I mean, if you make recommendations that would make sex-selective abortion legal, and you explicitly say that there should be nothing in the law to make it illegal, and then they say, oh no, we're not trying to legalize same-sex abortions. Well, of course they are. It's plain as the nose on your face. So that's what's happening. And it's interesting to see the debate around it. Lots of people, I just saw before I came online, a conservative councillor somewhere saying, oh, I'm pro-choice. I'm obviously pro-choice, but this is very, very wrong. If people are having abortions just because it's a girl, that's very, very bad. First thing to say to that, who thinks it would just be because of girls? When people think sex-selective abortion, they think immigrant communities, hyper-traditional values. They don't want daughters, they want sons. Because of various ways that their society is structured. And okay, there's an element of that. But I think there's also a lot of people who don't want boys because they think boys are bad and girls are a superior breed, basically, than boys. So I think there'll be a lot of people in society now. If you say, what would you rather have, a boy or a girl? They think, oh, girl, definitely. We don't want a big dose of toxic masculinity in our house, do we? Let's just let's have a girl. But really, it's the biggest moral issue about abortion that we can muster up, the fact that it might be a bit sexist, the way it's applied. But to a lot of people, that is the issue. If you can have abortion on an equal opportunities basis, a quota basis, then that's all fine. Taking the lives of unborn children, no problem with that, as long as it's not sexist. I mean, it's a very sad reflection on the morals of the nation, but that is what's dominating the debate. Another couple of things to mention on this is in the recommendations, if they're put into practice. I mean, the government, I'll talk about this in a minute, if they put them into a bill and brought them forward and passed them in the parliament, it would basically mean that a woman can perform an abortion on herself by any means she likes and at any stage of the pregnancy, and she wouldn't be breaking the law. And they also are heading towards saying as well, and then she can do what she likes with the baby's body. That's what we're heading towards if these recommendations are implemented. Will they be implemented? Will John Swinney want to bring forward a bill hyper quick now in time for the election? Well, basically, it's impossible. It's too late to bring forward a bill manifesting these recommendations before the election. So this will not be in the parliament before the election. So after the election, what will happen? Let's think about it. Let's say the SNP are the biggest party. John Swinney is the first minister again. Will he want to bring this forward? Well, it will be against his instincts, because his instincts are to be boring and uncontroversial. So from that point of view, he'd be thinking, don't really fancy this. But on the other hand, he'll think the next election's 5 years away. So if we do this unpopular thing now, I mean, everyone will have forgotten about it in 5 years' time. So we could just bite the bullet and do it. Take the hit, but then people will forget about it. We'll be fine by next election. And the other thing in John Swinney's inbox will be that his MSPs are absolutely dead set on making this law. They are very, very committed to it. The Greens, if he's in coalition with the Greens will be insisting on it. And John Swinney's own MSPs will be a more so-called progressive bunch than he's got at the moment. I mean, they're virtually all progressive at the moment, but by after the next election, they may be virtually 100%. So he will have massive pressure from his own MSPs to get on and do this. Right, how about Labour? Anna Sarwar is probably not too keen, but you'd have to put him on the rack to say that. He won't be saying that sort of thing publicly. Anna Sarwar will go with the flow. Look what Labour did at UK level. They decriminalised abortion. So it's in the Labour DNA, and the Labour MSPs will be absolutely for it. And the new Labour MSPs, if there's any, will be pushing for it. So Labour, I think, will be going along with it. That's what we can expect. Conservatives, well, Lib Dems will be totally supportive. Greens will be falling over themselves to support it. Now, Reform and the Conservatives, they might nitpick at some bits. I mean, the Conservatives, they might even say, we oppose decriminalisation. They might say that. Reform might say that as well. But I would imagine they both might be more tempted to go for the approach of just putting nothing in their manifesto, ignoring the issue, hoping it goes away, and they'll maybe pick it up after the election because they don't want to split their vote on it. I would expect that's what will happen. If it came to a vote, probably most Conservative MSPs, assuming there are any, most Reform MSPs would vote against most of these proposals. That's what I would sort of expect to happen. But they don't really care about these issues, so they'll keep it out of their manifestos. So part of our job next year will be to make this an election issue, to say, right, if the SNP or Labour get in, this is what's going to happen. If the opponents are Reform and Conservatives, will they oppose it? Well, who knows? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. So we'll be trying to make it an election issue. This was quite interesting. I mean, the Scottish media, the Herald, I've mentioned already, but other media as well, and UK paper, the Times, etc., they're very much pro-abortion campaigners. Now, the article I just showed you in the Times, in the Herald, you know how you get a panel up sometimes where it offers you links to other articles on a similar topic? Look at the links to this. It just shows you how one-sided the articles are in the Herald. So, expert group urges sweeping reform of abortion law in Scotland. That's basically presenting what the group is saying. Scotland abortion decriminalisation campaign launched. Scottish government accused of missing abortion care solutions target. Labour MP calls for Scotland to decriminalise abortion. All one way. And it's the media all over. It's interesting, the Daily Record, they treat reform quite reasonably, quite with some degree of respect. They don't just publish hit pieces on them. It is, okay, here are reform's policies. But when it comes to anyone who's pro-life, the gloves are off and they're vicious towards them. Right, time's flying. It's 5 to 10. A son is a son till he marries. A daughter is a daughter forever. I think I've heard that one before. Is it true? I hope not. No, I don't think so. No, I don't agree with that one. Tell us a bit more about it if you've got more to say about that. I just put that on social media. We'll be pushing this point a lot in the election campaign, saying to people, okay, there are some terrible proposals about abortion floating around the Scottish government, but let's remember those proposals, terrible though they are tinkering around the edges. The real issue is what we see in the table there. That's what we've got to be reminding people of time and time and time again. So if people are tempted to think, oh, I might vote Conservative or Reform, because I think they opposed one of those terrible measures that was proposed by the government. Well, I say that's just tinkering around the edges. The heart of the matter is shown in that table. Right, not long left. Although this was a bit of fun, I stuck on social media. The reports about this book, the picture at the top, depicting the Picts as being multiracial, which is totally bonkers. I mean, the Picts, the ancient people of Scotland, who are probably whiter than anybody, actually. And so, yeah, but people were saying how ridiculous it was. The book had done that. And so I made a fun thing there, just using AI, showing an ancient Zulu there with this kind of iron brew. You know what I said at the beginning? Sometimes things fly on social media. I mean, this flew on social media. I did a video and just put that image up as well. So we're reaching like tens of thousands of people with that. But then something pro-life doesn't have the same reach. But AI is amazing. Just to be able to come up with an image like that, to have the idea and within a couple of minutes, it's come up with an image is fantastic. Right, a bit of news from Germany, Berlin. A church conducting a sort of marriage ceremony for 4 men. This is still on the agenda. It's still bubbling around. The BBC's working away at it. The idea of sort of polyamorous relationships. How is it going to come to the Parliament first? I'm not quite sure. But one way or another, this is going to be rearing its head at the political level. It'll probably be under under the banner of some sort of human rights. People have got the right. They're discriminated against under the law for inheritance or visiting rights or pensions or something. There'll be some way in, some wedge issue where they can claim that they've been discriminated against because the state is not recognizing their polyamorous relationships. Like I was talking a couple of weeks ago, the Yemeni immigrant who's taken the Netherlands to court because they won't allow him to bring in his other wives on the grounds of family reunification. So one way or another, this will come out from different angles, and they will start getting the issue onto the agenda. It's going to happen. The pressure's building, the BBC's behind it, and let's see how that's going to develop. It'll be happening in churches as well. I mean, this is a very early case, but it will be coming to others as well. Okay, I've only got a minute or two. We're almost at the end. That was a sad one. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, and someone's showing all the concrete blocks to stop people driving trucks into Christmas markets. Sad. I mean, let's be honest there. I mean, it's basically worrying about Islamic terrorism. So it's now routine that these sort of things have to be built around Christmas markets. That's sad. Share about British farming and Scottish farming. Absolutely. Let's leave that story. I'll just do one more. This one I'll just do before we finish. Now, Kay Adams, radio show host, I think I might have had a conversation or two with her on the radio, pulled off BBC Radio Scotland because of a bullying probe. So basically, people have accused her of bullying. Now, I don't really know what the accusations are. I don't want to comment on the particular case. But apart from to say, when someone's accused of bullying these days, do I think to myself, oh, right, that's probably a bad person. I wonder what they've done. Right, that's very, very likely to be a real flaw in their character. What have they done to someone? I don't think that at all. I'm more likely to think some disgruntled or possibly awkward and uncooperative person further down the chain has got a grudge and they've accused their boss of bullying. I think today bullying is just so overused. And sometimes it can be, if boss says, look, you're late, you need to get here on time, or you're not working fast enough, or you haven't made a very good job of that. It's bullying. Report them for bullying. So I do worry that we've got an epidemic of bullying because we've got an epidemic of people who are too quick on the trigger to to accuse people of bullying. I saw something recently saying that if your boss runs the office or whatever, like a Montessori nursery, in other words, hyper gentle, caring or whatever, and men in that environment think, oh, for goodness sake, this is awful. Can we not just talk like normal people? Then you can't take anyone to court for that. You can't take anyone to court saying you were in a like hyper feminine, fluffy, mushy environment and you just did your head in and you couldn't stand it. I had to leave. There's no court case there. But if you're in an environment that's there's a bit of banter and fun and games and people, are a bit, you take the mickey out of each other or whatever, then you can take people to court and say that's a bullying environment, or where people talk straight and just say, look, that's not good enough. You need to do that again. Then, oh, that's bullying. So I think there's a real imbalance there. So Kay Adams, if you're watching, I'm sure she's not, but if she's watching, I would say you haven't gone down in my estimation in the slightest because of this accusation. If something comes out that she whacks someone over the head with a microphone because they made a mistake, then okay, fair enough, I'll take it seriously. But say now, when I hear someone accused of bullying, I just tend to think most likely that's just a nonsense. There's not really any substance to that. Anyway, our hour has passed. Thanks for your comments. And I will see you next week. We're just in the process, actually. We're thinking about our election campaigning. We're going to have some launch events around the country in January, actually, to get local activists together and see about how we can get the ball rolling with campaigning and planning. We'll be announcing candidates before too long as well and trying to raise funds for our election campaign. So that's what's going on behind the scenes, as well as what you're seeing coming out on social media. So, yeah, thanks for watching live and later, and see you next week.